All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Ryan, I can see you today. Where are you dialing in from today?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Excellent. If you are somewhere in the world, let us know in the chat where you're joining us from today. We welcome you to our joint fireside chat between Explorance, myself, and Ryan Sullivan from Thermo Fisher Scientific. We'll get started in just another minute or two. We'll let some folks join here. This will be and is being recorded. I'll say that right off the top. We will process it and send it out to everybody that has registered. So you'll get that probably, if not later today, probably tomorrow. There isn't really a slide deck. I've got a couple of just intro slides here for Ryan and myself, but for the most part, it's going to be us having a good old-fashioned conversation back and forth. How about that? Crazy, I know. But we hope you will settle in for this. If you're having lunch, please kick back, enjoy some lunch. If you want to ask a question, you have to come in through the Q&A panel to ask a question. And we are monitoring that. So if you have something you want to ask at any time, go ahead and put it in there. We'll be checking that off and on for questions and making sure that we get to those answers as we move through the webinar. All right, so your host for today, Ryan, I'm going to let you go first since you are our esteemed guest and client.
Sure thing. I'm Ryan Sullivan. I'm Director of Enterprise Learning at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And, Thermo Fisher Scientific is one of the largest pharmaceutical infrastructure companies in the world. And, we enable our customers, which are large pharma companies and the such, to help make the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. And that's really our mission. And, I work in the clinical trials division where we help get drugs from a molecule to approval and get them through the FDA approval process and things like that. So we do a lot of learning in my space.
That's great. And Ryan, just for, what's your involvement with measurement and evaluation and metrics and all that stuff? What's that look like for you for the last, 100 years? No, I'm kidding. Not that.
Yeah, well, I mean, my background in measurement specifically started around 2011 when I worked at Dell Technologies, and we were challenged to start a very widespread measurement program there, with over 170,000 learners across 4 to 5,000 instructor-led sessions a quarter. Significant investment there, and that's the first time that we used metrics that matter, or that I implemented metrics that matter and built a great program there. And then that caught some attention, and I got the opportunity in 2014 to come do the same thing again here at Thermo Fisher, or then we were PPD, and started all over again. So I think I have a great insight of having done this more than once, and I did that for a good 10 years here. Now I'm focusing on strategic initiatives and our industry's GXP training improvements, for which is a big priority for our business right now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And I'm Steve Lang. I'm the director of the consulting team here with Metrics That Matter at Explorance. If you don't know Explorance, we are a feedback company. Our name comes from exploring performance, and we explore performance through feedback. And we have different tools and industries we are connected with. Our tool Blue, what primarily is with the higher education. So if your son or daughter or relative is in college and they do a course evaluation, chances are they're using Blue. We also use it, though, in the HR talent space for things like competency assessments, engagement surveys, exit surveys, those types of things. We also have a great product last couple of years called Millie, which is our machine language AI tool for open comment analysis. So I know a lot of folks kind of got away from asking open-ended questions because they were tired of reading them all and they couldn't read them all. Now we have a solution for that. And that leads us to our other tool that we're talking about a little bit today is Metrics That Matter. And that sits in mostly the corporate learning and development world, which is what Ryan was talking about. where we are focusing on learning effectiveness and impact and outcomes. And Millie is actually built into MTM as well. So if you're collecting comments, you don't have to use another tool. You can all do it in one tool. Fair warning, I am also a former client. I used MTM exclusively when I was in charge of measurement and evaluation at McDonald's Hamburger University. The tool is, it's fully integrated. We can integrate with your LMS. We have a built-in methodology and framework. We have benchmarks, so you know what good looks like. We have AI compatibility with Millie, with more stuff coming out later this year and next year. We've got different ways of measuring your learning. So whether you're doing blended learning, whether you're doing leadership development, onboarding, sales training, whatever it might be, we've got methodology for it and a lot of automation to help you get through the administration process. So you're spending more time with your data rather than having to collect it. So you can actually analyze it and pull out those insights. And more importantly, too, we're not just a tech vendor. We like to consider ourselves truly partners. It's one of the reasons I was able to twist Ryan's arm to join us on today's fireside chat, because we've partnered with Ryan for a long time, and we've got deep connections with professional services and client success and the consulting team. All right, enough about the commercial. I'm even going to turn this off because we are chatting. So Ryan, let's start off with a big picture question. So we're talking about learning budgets and learning and development and measurement evaluation, how that all kind of connects. So, what do you see as some pressing challenges for L&D leadership today when it comes to budget? How are they dealing with getting budget or defending budget?
I mean, it's really tricky right now with everything, all the economic uncertainties happening from a macro sense in the world. I think it's harder now probably to get budgets for anybody than it was, say, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But there's also this unique challenge that everything coming at us that we need to stay current is costing more. If I'm sure many people on this call are been talking to vendors that have AI features, and they want significant investments for these latest technologies. And we're all navigating that right now. And I think that challenge of needing to increase your technology spend to stay current when it's harder to get those funds, I think is what's probably facing most L&D teams right now.
Yeah. So can you share maybe a time when you maybe, I don't want to say struggled, but when you had an element of your L&D budget was at risk, or you had to create a business case or turn something around? I mean, how do you do that, and how are you using measurement and evaluation as part of that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, to be honest, I don't know if it's ever not at risk, but yes, there are
Good
times
point.
there
Good
are
point.
times when it's more challenging than others. But I never want to get comfortable when I'm thinking about it, trying to stay, 1, 2, 3 years ahead. But yeah, I mean, having good metrics, um, there's been some times where it's been more challenging, like for example, when a company's getting ready to go public with an IPO, they run through the company with a consultancy or accounting firm, and they look for everywhere they can squeeze. I'd say that was one unique challenge that I've been in multiple times. But the most recent version of that, you know, they came to us just hoping that they had found a gold mine because it's a learning team. And uh, I was able, fortunately, we had been working on getting us some good internal metrics up until that point. And the one that really helped the most was we had started measuring our internal development ratio, right? So how many hours does it take us to develop certain kinds of training per student hour? And we were benchmarking ourselves to outsourcers, right? Not out from a defensive posture, but simply, is this better to do in-house or is it better to outsource, right? But that came in handy at that moment because, we showed that we were far more efficient than NIIT, no offense if they're on, or teams like that at the time. And the accountants turned away with very minor changes to our budget. So, I think be proactive. When you get asked to, it's already too late. If you're being asked about your budget, if you're being asked to shrink it, you need to have a plan in place. You need to have really good metrics at any point in time to show your productivity, your efficiency, your effectiveness, and your outcomes.
So, yeah, I want to definitely go there.
Yeah.
But first, I'm curious. So when you were talking about, we showed them this one metric around our, I'll call it, well, efficiency, right? Your
Yeah.
time to
Hmm.
produce. Um, it would seem to me too that something like that also helps establish a certain level of credibility, that you are approaching L&D as a business, just like the marketing side or the sales side or the finance side. How important is something like that when you're trying to either get budget or even just as you're trying to align yourselves to what the business is doing?
I think it's incredibly important. You need to walk, talk, act like a business function, or almost like your own business inside of a business, right? And I think most leaders don't, they come to a learning group and see it as a subset of HR or wherever. And it's a mandatory cost and it's just, a bucket of money that they have to manage. And then when you pull out goals and your cost, and you've got targets you're working towards, you've got forecasts for the remainder of the year, and you're walking and talking like a real business unit. I think it instantly resets that assumption of what an L&D team does. And I think that's a great first step into establishing credibility, is just finding out how do the other businesses report to the CEO. Um, Match that flow. Have your QBRs look like their QBRs. If you have big gaps in your metrics, if you cannot show what you're doing and how much it's costing, and you do not have targets and goals for that throughout the year, and the ability to track against it, then that's immediately you're losing credibility there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Because all that, as you're, finding those things out, you're helping align L&D initiatives to organizational goals,
Yeah.
right? Because you're trying to find out not just what and how to measure, but why you're measuring it, because you're wanting to link it to what else is going on in the business, which helps us then focus on, we also need to speak the language of the business, right?
Yeah.
So have you had to, I know you have, how do you translate like L&D impact into language that resonates with these stakeholders? I mean, what works, what doesn't work? How do you convince them that something like wasted learning or performance improvement or
Yeah.
whatever is a metric, and then how do you speak their language to get them on board?
I mean, some of it's trial and error. I think it is, tying into what is part of the company's culture. For example, when I was at Dell was very NPS forward, right?
Mm.
It was on our homepage every day. We'd see it everywhere. So when you'd come in and you'd use NPS to measure learning, it made sense. Nobody had any questions. It was a big win. When I moved over here and they did not use NPS, they did not understand it. And I brought that up to try to, use that to describe how learning is performing. It went over very poorly, right? So, you've got to match what is in the organizational culture. Um, that's one thing. If it's all about, like, for example, we are a very billable business with human capital, right? So we have to turn hours into revenue. So when we talk about scrap learning, we don't talk about scrap learning. We talk about getting rid of non-bill of unnecessary non-billable training hours, right? And that speaks right to their heart. And but if we started talking scrap learning, that's the learning jargon. We do like using that inside our walls, and we do talk NPS inside our walls. But our business, they really trust their people, and it's a people-driven business. So thinking about hours, non-billable hours reduced, focusing on things like whether or not their team thinks it was a worthwhile investment, whether or not their managers think that it was worth it. That really speaks to our executive teams. They trust their people. They trust their leaders. Um, and you know, some organizations, especially in tech, they might not trust their people as much. It's all about the hard numbers, right? Or and so those are different. You've got to align to what the context of your organization is.
All right. And you have to find out what that is, right? Like you
Yep.
learned NPS. Okay, that's
Yeah.
not going to float.
Yeah. I spent
And
30 minutes trying to explain it to one of
yeah,
our senior
and
executives, and that was it. I came out of there, I said, we're not using NPS anymore.
and you have to be ready to, not, it's like I'm not going to follow my sword over that, right?
Yeah. Right.
Early in my consulting career here with Metrics That Matter, NPS used to push it really hard, and I had a client push back really hard and said, "Look, Steve, you got to get off your high horse on this because we don't speak NPS anywhere else in the business, and I'm not going to be able to convince them. So, we love everything else, but we're just, and that really that hit me. It's like, okay, I have to pull back on some of these things, even though it's part of our model and
Yeah.
whatever. But if it's not going to fit into your culture, you've got to be willing to move on, but find something else. And I love how so for folks that might not know what scrap learning is, within MTN, we have a key metric called scrap learning. And it's really it's wasted learning. So it might be time, it might be materials, it's cost, it's all those things. So if you've got a whole bunch of training and you're not going to, and let's say you're only going to apply 10% of it, that's 90% scrap, right? Because you're wasting that. I use the analogy back in my day, since I'm really old. We used to get the big 3-ring binders at the end of every training, and you take it back to your office and you go on a shelf and you never pull it out again. That's a waste. That costs a lot of money to print, produce, ship, all that stuff, but it's wasted. So I like, though, Ryan's tack on that was, okay, but how do we translate that? Well, we can translate into that to lost productivity. Because if we're in training, we're not being productive. It's kind of like opportunity cost, but it's a little different. And so not only are we in training and wasting time, but then they didn't find the training valuable. So then we've wasted that as well. But let's talk about it in terms that they can understand, which is product. Usually, every company can talk about productivity
Yeah.
as a good measure.
And that's always a great starting point. It's often the low-hanging fruit. When I came here, I'm new to this industry. I don't have a clinical background, but I could see that things were assigned very, very broadly. So one of the first things I went after is we started measuring, all this training that was assigned to so many people. And, it's so easy in MTM. We just put out surveys and MTM has all the demographics of the people. And we could clearly see very easily all these departments, these roles, these job titles are saying this is hardly relevant to them. And we just went and changed the assignment profiles. That alone, very simple, very easy to do. It was easy to get support from the business. And that alone, we cut over 400,000 hours off the books of training. So, we all have a number of what 1 hour costs in our company. Do the math. That's a lot. And, that's a lot of FTE. There's a lot you could do with that time. And not only was it a big win but it also helped us first start to build credibility. People saw us as good stewards of the company resources.
That's excellent. So then you're talking about some things here that prime me for another discussion point here about um, thinking about measurement and metrics and the strategies you want to bring in there. Are there some specific things in terms of either a measurement strategy or process that helps make a strong case for continued investment in L&D? I love how you talk about how you don't want L&D to be a cost center. You don't want to talk about it as terms of a cost center or a checkbox. It's an investment. It's a strategic investment. So when we talk about measurement and measurement strategies, particularly for L&D, how do we make that strong case for continued investment?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey for me. I remember when I came in 2014, when I came to this organization, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to take, you know, transform learning from a mandatory cost to a strategic investment. I didn't quite know how I was going to do that. I was maybe, 3, 4 years into learning measurement at that time. But through those years and partnering with great thought leaders, um, we really were able to experiment and use a lot of the advice we'd get from our partners like the MTM team and other great partners that everybody knows, like Patty Phillips and the Center for Talent Reporting and all of that. And that we came up with a model that and we started experimenting. And the thing that made the most sense and then what we started doing is that business alignment. So, at the time we had HR business partners, that's pretty common. We launched a learning business partner role, right? And everyone on our leadership team got assigned, a department, and they would go get entrenched in there from, the VP down and learn about that group. And then we all come together, and we still do this to this day, to share what's happening there. What are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? And instead of being the McDonald's drive-through, no offense, Steve, where you're waiting for someone to pull up and tell you their order, we switched it around to being in the room when it happens of, hey, we have this problem and we need to transform our business. And we would be right there to be able to say, hey, we can help in these ways. And instead of like a reactive way we build our portfolio, it slowly changed to a more strategic way. And then that grew from there, where it was not, you know, per business unit. It's now our most senior leaders coming to us with big company-wide objectives that they want us to go drive and solve for.
All right, that was awesome, but a lot to unpack here if I
Yeah,
can for the second. So just the concept of the HR business partner role, which we're all
yeah,
familiar with, but
yeah,
turning it into an L&D business partner role.
yeah,
For those of you that are familiar with Dr. Keith Keating, he's written a couple of books on the trusted business advisor and hidden value of L&D. And for me, that's exactly what that is. You are creating that business advisor role between the business and L&D. So they don't have to wait until there's a problem, or they don't have to come to you with a training need when half the time we know it's really not a training need. So you've got someone there sitting in and being embedded in the business, being able to be more proactive. And I also like the second thing you said about how, how can L&D help within their purview, right? Like we're not going to solve the entire problem, but where does an L&D solution fit into whatever business problem they're having? Is that kind of that's kind of the concept
yeah.
of the
Exactly. And then, from there you get even more proactive where, I really like the Dave Vance, Peggy Parsky model, right? Of, start at the top, as you're looking at next year's planning, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish this year? And it's probably big goals like we need to increase revenue, we need to do this or that, earnings per share, all of that. And then, how are you planning on doing that? Who on your team is driving these things? And where do you think learning can have a role in that? And, and they're going to be like, yeah, go talk to Julie over there, in sales, and she's running this initiative. And then you've got that flow of, you know, you're working the boss's problem, and he's sent you to these people, or they've sent you to these people, and now you've got that tie-in to start partnering with them, and hopefully you already have those connections, right? Because you've established business partners, and you're now turning it even to more proactive. So you're planning out your next year just like a business would, right? And you're going to build those. Okay, we think we can help you achieve this growth goal with these learning initiatives, right? And this is what we need from you to make that happen, and this is what we're going to put in. And you get that agreement, and that sets up your portfolio for the next year, instead of it all being reactive crisis management.
And then at the same time, I'm guessing, hoping that you're also then having the conversation around, okay, this is how we're going to help you this is going to be our portion of how we're helping, but this
Yeah.
is also what success is going to look like
Yeah.
and how we're going to know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also a big fan of the 6Ds method, and I just love those checklists. If you go through those checklists on the first two disciplines, it's you can't go wrong. On any conversation about any program, uh, those are those are going to make sure you're set up for success. And it's just that forward-thinking partnership approach instead of that reactive order taking. And it doesn't happen overnight, it happens in stages. But once you get there, it's very transformative in how, it's like earning a seat at the table as a legitimate business function. And when you get there, that's really where you're seen as an investment of, I know if I put $5 million into the learning team, they're gonna help me hit my goals, right? I don't know exactly how they do it, but they're going to help, right?
Well, and it's almost becomes, it's not even a budget. You're not
Yeah,
even having conversations about budget
yeah,
anymore because
yeah,
you've got the partnership, you've established the credibility,
yeah.
they bought into what success looks like, and they're so. Was there let me ask you, was there a bit of a fear factor with your team with establishing this type of an approach? Because it's not like you can, throw just anybody into that role and expect them to be interfacing with the business and be, what I would call performance consulting, right? Because you're sitting there,
Yeah.
you're listening for things. You have to have some business acumen. You want to have them take you seriously. That you're not just, I'm not just here from training. I'm here as a, as a consultant. I mean, did you have issues with that?
It's always an ongoing opportunity for development for all of us. I mean, myself included. And we do match up people who are new to it with, let's say, more simple or easier business stakeholders and groups.
Right.
It is a good development path for developing leaders within L&D. And we look at it every year or so, or if we have people cycle in or out of the department, we reassess who's best where, uh, partnering with each group. But yeah, it does take um, a lot of experience and business acumen to be able to do that. And sometimes, there needs to be some investment in developing that and coaching people along. We do some of that, especially for a lot of our project managers and instructional designers. It's good to, I think that's the hardest part as an instructional designer, someone who loves to design learning, is having to negotiate with stakeholders. It's so easy just to do what they want, right? And it might not be if you're a creative person, it's not your natural being to have an intense conversation about, we're not going to do this if you don't put in, X, right? You don't give us your SME time, or what you're wanting to take out of this program makes it useless and a big waste of money. We're not going to do that. So that de-scoping kind of battle that you have with a lot of stakeholders. So, we're constantly working on, how do you have those conversations? How do you negotiate to upskill the team to do that?
Yeah. Um, and one of the things too around you're upskilling folks to have these conversations and things. Are there certain things around um, I guess I can't get the word. Oh yeah. So what when you think about monetizing some of your key metrics, right? There's a little bit of a skill there needing to know. Oh, because if you want to talk the language of the business, right? They want to talk about money.
Yeah.
So are there any type of metrics that you and your team have learned to monetize and or do you get pushed back on that kind of stuff?
Well, sometimes finance doesn't, they have a hard time translating things to the ledger, right? And we all know that. So it's just like any business, if you're trying to save time, that's not directly monetizable unless the ledger's changing, which means you're either hiring less or you're letting go of people, right, from a headcount perspective, or you're cutting vendor spend or something, right? Cutting travel.
Mm,
Um, but I think I think that's sometimes short-sighted, just thinking about bottom line. I think it helps to focus more on top line. If you're a business that sells products, the output of those widgets, whatever you're building, and the margin on those is what speaks really more than anything to the business leaders. For us, our commodity is time, people, hours, right? And we want to reduce the time that we can't bill, and we want to maximize the time that we can, right? And also make sure that the customers are satisfied with the quality of what they're purchasing. So those are kind of areas you can focus on. I like to focus on top line growth oriented type initiatives and projects because it's easier to monetize than taking something off the ledger.
right, right. Well, and there's when we talk about, taking stuff off a ledger, that can also apply to L&D,
Yeah.
only because you think about, and I say we because, I was an instructional designer for 25 plus years, so I'll throw myself into that camp. But, we're really good at producing a lot of stuff, but we're really bad at taking stuff away or knowing when to take stuff off the shelf or off the ledger, right?
Yes.
Because, and I don't know if you have an example of something where, as we talk about time, money, and resources, right? That's, training takes up all of that. So did you ever have a time when you had to use some metrics to show that, hey, this program is getting good results from an evaluation standpoint, but it's really not connected to anything else. It's not connected
Oh
to
yeah.
saving us time, money, or getting that product out the door or reducing costs or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, those are the hardest decisions. And sometimes it's not that we have to not do the program. When I was at Dell, it was just changing the timing of the program, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you if you if you do it here, it's 100% waste. We just lost $30 million, right? If you move it back 3 months, it actually matters because that's when those engineers are getting those cases. But yeah, I mean, it happens a lot, and it's always a tough decision. I remember many years ago when we had a group doing a big process like a Lean Six Sigma program. And at the end of it, we found that it cost the savings they found from projects out of that program did not exceed the cost of the training, and they just shut it all down, right? Or sometimes, you put a lot of work into something, but the winds or the sands shift, and you could roll it out just because you put work into it, but you're going to waste all that learner time. It's better just to scrap it or start over. And we've had a few of those where we get all the way to the end. We've put 1,000 hours into building something, and something changed, and it's no longer relevant. And you've got to just swallow it and take it off. Or maybe something's just usually anything that we've had that's not performing, we just fix it, right? And that's a whole nother issue on building credibility is showing that you can. I've found that turnaround stories build more credibility than success stories.
All right, now I need an example. I need an
Okay.
example. I'm
Yeah.
going to ask for that.
Yeah. So, if you, I mean, we've had many programs like best laid plans, but something's just not right when you launch it. Something you didn't account for, something your SMEs didn't tell you, something the business didn't tell you, another change that you didn't know about gets applied at the same time, all kinds of factors out there. And, we measure are those early stages of program performance are critical. We look at that to figure out, well, what do we need to improve? I mean, we had a program recently that rolled out, and it was probably the worst NPS I've seen in my career, negative 72%,
Oh my.
and something like that. And, but, the reaction was, let's not justify it or defend it. Let's find out why. right? And all the data was there. It was some kind of, and we went and tweaked those things, right? We had to adjust the audience of who's coming into the training. We changed some of the examples in the training. We the senior leadership needed to clarify why people were taking this, right? We had to, make our WIFM more robust for our learners, and we made those changes, and we saw a drastic swing. And being able to tell that story of, look, that turned out to be like a big success story because not only did it show that we're watching and we're being accountable for our programs, but it also justified all of the effort and spend we put into measurement. Because if we weren't measuring that, if we didn't have this partnership with Explorance, we just wouldn't know. And that would be a big waste of money that would have, once we scaled, it would have been a big problem. But we were able to catch all of that right away, fix it before we scaled the program.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounded like there was some L&D stuff, but then there's also stuff on the business
Yeah.
side, right? And that's where, going back to, I know we're hammering on it, but that goes back to that relationship that you are establishing with the business to be able to say, hey, look, the training, this stuff for the training, yeah, this is broken. We know what that is. We can fix that. But then there's this stuff that, we're not really sure, because that's out in the field, or that's out in the role, or that's, that those are things that we need your help to address. But we have the data. We can tell you exactly what it is, but we know we need your help to fix that and kind of hold up your end of the bargain, right? Of the learning and development side.
Yeah, and if you can be to if you can be first to your executive sponsors with that story before they start hearing complaints, that's the best case scenario. And I think some people are afraid. Like, I don't want to share that we failed, but I just feel like it shows more business maturity, and senior executives, senior vice presidents, um, they they they've put more trust in you when you can demonstrate that you can be accountable, you can take a problem and turn it around. Because when you just come out and be like, hey, everything's amazing, everything's the highest it can be, we're beating all the benchmarks, I think that's almost met with skepticism, right? But and that does not, I don't feel, builds the amount of trust and credibility as being showing that you're accountable and able to turn around a program or
Right,
fix
right.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
and on the flip side too, like, a program can be doing really well. NPS can be high.
Yeah.
Estimated performance improvement can be doing well. It can be a worthwhile perceived value from the learners. And but then, you have to also to sometimes look underneath that and decide, okay, yeah, but we had a program at McDonald's that was launched to all the restaurants, where the department managers were doing virtual training for the very first time, right? Great idea on paper, because we could reach every department manager in the country via, well, that wasn't Zoom back then, but via
Yeah.
this method. They didn't have to go to a classroom. The operator didn't have to pay for them to travel. What a great idea. We invested millions of dollars at HU on these soundproof booths and all the technology, trained up all the HU professors to deliver it. Um, and while the evaluations that we were getting via MTM were great, the sessions were designed for like 15 to 20 people, and we were averaging like single digits to get them into these sessions. And oftentimes the sessions would end abruptly, because guess what happens when a bus pulls up in the parking lot of a McDonald's?
Yeah.
The department manager can't just, ignore that. It's all hands on deck, right? Um, so, and we had to have, and the operators themselves were seeing this, and they're like, we're just not seeing the return on this investment of this virtual training, even though we know we're still saving money by not sending people. We're still, and on the HU side, we're two professors were delivering these at the same time, right? One was producing while one was actively facilitating. And it was, they had to schedule these out weeks in advance, and it was very complicated. And just, when you're only reaching half of your audience, that's, you're not hitting the mark. Something's not working. The value's not there, even though your scores are high. So you have to think of, okay, what are we going to do? How do we, to your point, it wasn't like it was a failure. we just weren't getting everything that we thought we were getting from it.
Yeah, that's why it's so important, to have that strong stakeholder relationships and to do that really good analysis to understand what all of the other factors are that will affect people taking knowledge they've learned and applying it. That study several years ago, New York Police Department did that study. I cite this one a lot, where they spent millions on the best implicit bias training you could buy from the smartest professors in the country, I think from Harvard, if I remember correctly, and they proved that everybody learned something new and they retained the knowledge and the concepts, but it didn't change anything because the problem was around the culture and the leadership and all of those types of things. And I'm constantly reminding, voicing with our team is we designed all of that, right? You have to consider all of that in your design. How do you train the executives on this? How do you train the people managers on this? How do you reinforce it? How do you lift? How do you incentivize people to try again once they failed trying it the first time? All of that, right? And it's not, so it's kind of just thinking larger. And part of that is thinking, the more you're aware of the business, I've noticed that the more instructional designers naturally think of all of those elements. So that goes together.
Absolutely. You have to have that the business acumen, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes, you have to go in there and it's okay not to know, but like, how does your business really make money? How does your business or your business unit, wherever you're sitting, how does it make money? How does it return a value to whatever it might be, shareholders or it's privately owned, whatever it is, but what are the root things that go into that? And then I like how you've said, L&D needs to be a good steward
Mhm.
because while, we don't want to be a cost center. I mean, we sort of are, right? I mean, because we don't sell anything, right? We're not bringing in profit. But at the same time, we have to be good stewards of the money of what the business is giving us. We want to maintain that credibility with them, so we want to make sure we're making good decisions and choices on what we're deciding to design and build and deliver. And if something's not working, we have to, again, it goes back to being that good steward and being honest with that. So something else, Ryan, you mentioned, you did this at Dell and you did it here. How do you build sustainability into all of this? How do you keep it working? How do you get other people to be talking like Ryan Sullivan at Thermo Fisher, or how do you get people to represent you when you're not in the room so that this can not only be sustainable, but how does it also scale and grow throughout the company?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot to share our successes. There's a lot of transparency. I think transparency is key, right? You need to share your successes, your lessons learned, like we talked about. You need to, ensure that stakeholders and everybody has real-time access to the data, to the programs, and people can all follow along with what you're doing, right? I think transparency is key, and really continuously evaluating what you're doing. We made a big shift last year in what we were focused on because the needs of the company changed, right? So continuously evaluating, what are you working on? What's up and coming? Where are you invested at? Are all of your programs slipping into simply maintaining compliance, or are you still driving growth? MTM has a great portfolio model that we like to leverage that is a great landscape of where you're most invested in. And that's great to revisit and continuously evaluate that, right? Are you stuck in hard slogs, things that they're high value, but they take all your time? Where can what are some things that are high value that take less time that you can go reprioritize on? So I think that's extremely important. and also adapting to whatever the market trends are. Everyone's asking already, be working in AI before your leadership team asks you, hey, can we get rid of a lot of this training with AI? So you need to be ahead of those types of trends, and showing where you're being cutting edge and you're considering, all the latest options and things like that, and bringing those to the table before you're asked. I'd say proactiveness is key. And then also just being very collaborative across, I don't think many big companies are not centralized with their learning teams. More are usually federated. That's kind of the model that we're in. And, that makes sense, right? We don't need to be managing people who have to train in-person pipetting in a lab, right? That's very specific that needs to be done there. We don't have to have that centralized. But we need to make sure we're very collaborative with all of those teams, and we've got our finger on the pulse of what their needs are, the problems that they're facing, and we're filling in those solutions centrally, right? What is the new technology that all of these learning teams all need, and let's partner on that. One of the big things that I did early on when I brought learning measurement to this organization was I centralized learning measurement, right? So we volunteered to do learning measurement for any L&D team, and that was a
Wow.
great way that we helped solidify everybody together, bring everybody to standards, and be able to start showing numbers about learning across the company that no one had ever really had before, and that led to a lot of transformative initiatives. Yeah,
And hopefully metrics that matter was a part of that.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So by the way, I just want to remind folks, if you've got some questions, please go to the Q&A button there and pop them in there, and we will answer them. But I know that so Ryan, we're towards the end of the year here. Some of us, like at Explorance, we have a fiscal year that ends this week, but others, it's the calendar year. They're getting ready for the budget cycle. So if I'm going to put you on the hot seat here, I mean, if you could give one or two pieces of advice to L&D leaders that are trying to prepare for the budget cycle, I mean, what should they be doing? What should they be preparing? What conversations should they be having? Where should they be having them?
Yeah, I mean, what we're all facing, what do they call it? Our 9+3 forecast right now. I mean, we're in that right now. Um, I think that if you're not measuring today, you need to start, right? Immediately. So I'd kind of two paths. If you're not measuring, you need to start measuring. Start something small, find an area that's high impact, partner with somebody like Metrics That Matter. They make it easy, and just go. Start measuring some of your programs and get ready to show value in that. If you are already doing that, though, I'd say make sure you're aligned with the business, right now, as everyone's working on their budgets for next year. What are their goals for next year? Where do they think they're going to need your help? Who's running those initiatives? What investments are you going to need help from them to achieve? Like, we often need to get on their budgets, right? It's easier for them to get budget for a tool than for us to. So, if we have a team that has an online platform and they're rolling out new training for it, you can be there to say, hey, there's this great tool we can add to this that would really increase the performance and reduce the error rates of them using this new tool. It's going to cost about 20,000. That's easier for them to put in their budget.
Right. Right. Well, you briefly mentioned the portfolio model in MTM, which it's built into MTM, but it's not exclusive
Yeah.
to metrics that matter. But it is a way to have these budget conversations where you've got, when you think about what L&D is doing, we're either helping, protect the business, so compliance training and things that we have to do. We're helping foundational learning, so things like onboarding and project management stuff that everyone does. Then there's growing the business, so going after market share and things. And then there's things that we're trying to do to improve efficiencies, operational efficiencies, saving time and money, right? So if you think about where all your courses or
Yeah.
where your programs fit into those things, you can start having these conversations around, wow, what do you mean 90% of our stuff is in compliance? Should 90% of our budget really be towards compliance, or should it be over here spending more time doing these things? So you can be, that's how you have a strategic conversation with folks when you're mapping, like you keep saying, what are the priorities of the business? Okay, here's the 7 priorities. Or I have one company client, they've got these 5 main pillars, right? And you better be tying something into one of those 5 pillars, or it's not going to get done. So you've got to be able to align what you were doing with what the business is trying to do.
And you might have programs that you're doing for that person, but they no longer align to their goals. And you've got to have that conversation. Well, look, we're stuck doing all of this for you. What of that can we let go so we can drive growth or so we can improve your foundations?
All right, Ryan, you have a question. Someone's asking, how mature was the L&D ops when you stepped into Thermo Fisher?
Um, I would say on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being you're 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 a newborn. I would say it was a 1, right? Um, but that's one of the reasons they wanted me to come over is because they kind of knew what they wanted, and they needed someone who had some experience to come in and help them accelerate that. So they wanted me to go from newborn to run fly right away, right? And that was my challenge coming in. So yeah, but it was an uphill battle, and I had a lot of lessons learned from having done that once before, and it went pretty well. But I made sure they were all in the right ways before I joined. Their executives were in on it. They were willing to invest in tools and headcount to make it all happen. And I made it a condition. I want to pull in this vendor, this Metrics to the Matter platform, if I'm going to come do this. And they said, absolutely, right? So, we really hit the ground running, and we matured very quickly.
Right. And I think you were just starting to touch on this, but the second part of the question was, and you talked about, that the L&D ecosystem is federated, but you centralized measurement.
Yeah.
Were there some what were some success conditions that you had to be put in place to implement that? I think part of it you're talking just now is about getting buy-in, but what are some of the things that you put in place?
Well, we went after everybody's main pain point, scrap learning, right? We said, let's do some surveys and you can find out, if you're overtraining people. And that was an easy sell in our business that's revenue hourly based. So yeah, you find that foot in the door. Find a champion that you can get results on and then spread that message. You don't have to start with everybody. You can just start with one business leader who wants to do it, and then you can share those successes.
Okay. And so sharing those successes, would you say, so there's another question here, but I'm gonna
Mhm.
see if this is a pivot to answering that. Someone wants to know, you know, when you're trying to get your teams to be consistent in the processes, as we talk about measurement,
Mhm.
how are they consistent? It sounds like maybe one way is, to get those leaders to be talking about it
Yeah.
in the same,
You got
playbook.
to get everybody on the same page with the language, you've got to standardize the metrics and how we're talking about training effectiveness, and you've got to sell everybody on why you need those standards. And that never ends. I felt like all my years I spent leading the learning analytics function, I felt like I was almost like a whip in the US Congress. I'm constantly out there just no, you can't do custom questions. Here's why. I used to have that conversation twice a week. No, here's why we can't, add custom questions because you're starting an experiment. We don't we don't know what that's going to lead to. And you can't make decisions off of that experiment. And so it takes a lot of just staying up to speed, um, staying on top of people going rogue. It takes a lot of work. You're constantly out there. Um, Nudging the herd back into the alignment you need everybody to go.
Yeah, and of course, as the revolving door of an organization is, right, you
Yeah.
got to The next person comes in, same thing. Next, or a new team's formed, same thing,
Yep.
or whatever it might be. It's
What I've noticed is a lot of the same people start moving around. So you've got like a measurement champion ends up over there and then they build it there, right? And it makes it all better. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right, we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to take this time to thank Ryan and Thermo Fisher for allowing him to be here today and talk to us about this topic. And I love how, you started out talking about budgets, but then kind of went to strategy and alignment and strategic relationships. But it all works together. It's all interconnected, right? To get budget and defend it and ask for it, you can't just be passive. You have to be active in terms of the business and what they need and establishing these relationships and not just waiting for something. But I love the fact that you turned it into business partners for HR, but let's do the same thing, but in learning and embed people. What an exciting thing to be doing, other than just acting as an instructional designer. So I do thank you for your time today. We will be sending this out, the recording of this conversation, either today or tomorrow. Just another last minute plug here. And by the way, Ryan just presented at our last Explorance World. That's kind of where this conversation was born, because I said on his presentation, I'm like, Ryan, we've got to get you on a webinar to talk about this and some other things. And he was all for it. But so Explorance World, this is where all of our clients come together. So I had mentioned other products and other business lines and things that we have, but we bring everyone together because we're all talking feedback, we're all talking evaluation and measurement, and how to have conversations with stakeholders and make things better through feedback. So this year, I'm proud to announce in June, it's going to be at Boston University in Boston, Massachusetts. So our friends at Boston University have agreed to host us. If you like this type of a conversation and this type of content, there's way more of an Explorance World. It is a lot of clients coming together and telling their stories, as well as great things that go on with our products and keynote speakers. So it's a really great time. I have to say, Boston's probably one of my favorite. I call it my favorite little city because it's not like giant like Chicago and New York, but it's still it's still a great city to visit, and it's the home of Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, what else more do you want? So thank you for your time and attention today. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to see you on our next webinar. Right? Thanks. Have a good rest of your week.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for tuning in.